So I'm halfway through these two things. The next thing that I talk about here, and I'll just move over to this slide again to remind us where we are. So I've now talked about advising and support and how this becomes full commitment. This then becomes a major issue by 1968 because the war is so wide and has taken up so much, is killing so many people. It's killing more Vietnamese than anybody else. I mean, the Vietnamese are, it's just a slaughter. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's a genocide. But okay, and the Americans are dying in increasing numbers. I mean, it's just the weekly death count, which is a body count, which is a thing that I'll talk about, is seriously bad news. I mean, people are dying at a terrible rate. So what this does is it brings the war home. And so you have to, at some point when you're studying Vietnam or when you're looking at the Vietnam War, you have to deal with what did it look like for people at home? Because the people at home are going to be crucial in stopping the war. Like, how is the war going to come to an end? Because Westmoreland, the general who was in charge, the Western general who was in charge of American forces, and who was the Allied general in charge in the same way that Eisenhower had been, was nuts. He kept going and saying, you know, we're nearly there. We're just turning a corner. We're nearly finished. The lights, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, knowing very well that they weren't going to be able to be successful at all. And he eventually what got him relieved of duty, as if why it took so long. Well, we know why it took so long. But anyway, was that he was going to go, he was on a plane going back to Washington to ask, who was he? I guess he was going to ask Nixon for 1 million men to put in the field. So Westmoreland was finished. So we have this situation of dealing with the war at home. Remember that World War II was very much fresh in people's minds. By 1968, World War II was really only 20 years in the past, and it was so important to the generation of people who were, I mean, they were 20-year-olds basically, so people who were your age, and their parents who were 40, right? And the 40-year-olds had either fought in World War II or survived World War II, one way or another. It had an enormous impact on their lives. So most of the teens who went to fight in Vietnam, and they were mostly teens, the average age of the combat soldier in Vietnam was 19. The average age of the combat soldier in World War II was 26. So that gives you an idea of how many older men there would have been fighting in the forces in World War II. I mean, there actually were 40-year-olds who were fighting. And whereas Vietnam was really fought by people, I mean, if the average age is 19, then there were 17-year-olds in the field, and which was legal. You had to have your parents' permission to go and fight. But if you were determined and you were 17, you could go fight. And in a lot of cases, we know that people, probably the poor and African Americans, were just drafted. They were like, yeah, they look 17, that's fine. So the tendency in the 50s and 60s, which I was talking about, to accept the president and his, hold on a second.